And we're live. This is Mahab Ali from Egypt. I'm the co-founder of Virtually Connecting. And this is a first. It's the first time that we do Virtually Connecting with a fully virtual conference, which is the LX conference, which is not taking place anywhere particular. And we were just talking, we don't know where to put it on the map. I think I'm going to put it in Australia because that's where this is. And I'll ask people who are with us here. Some of them were big idea speakers, so like featured speakers in the conference, and some were participants like myself. And there's also Patrice who was following just on Twitter. And so I'll start with Joyce, whose idea of this conference was to introduce herself, and we'll ask everyone to introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll go back and talk about the conference itself. Go ahead, Joyce.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Maha, for inviting me. My name is Joyce Seitzinger. I'm with Academic Tribe, and together with Mark and Spiros, I co-organized the LX conference.
Indy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, sure. I am based out of San Francisco, and I was one of the speakers at the conference, and the topic was trying to get people to be a little bit more mindful about the differences and the variety and breadth of the type of people that they want to support in whatever they're trying to do.
Thank you. Yishai, do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Yishai from Levinsky College of Education, and I gave a talk at the conference about sort of the synergies between learning design and design-based research, and shared some tools that I use in my work, both in the sort of more scientific aspects of design-based research of education and in more practitioner-oriented learning design work.
I'm from Cape Town. My name is Yolanda Morkel. I teach at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology. I was one of the speakers. I was very happy to share a case study in our architecture studio that happened over several years, a long process of many iterations, resulting in a program that brings learning to students in remote locations from diverse backgrounds. And for me, the takeaway point was really that we have to listen to our students and to our users, to the people that we design for and with, and that we then must just try things, not to try and make it perfect, just get started and carry on designing as we go along, listening and learning and taking the leap.
Thanks, Yolanda. And I can't wait to share what I learned from, that we have architecture happen online with folks over here, because nobody's going to believe that. Jess, are you here? I know we lost you for a few minutes. I can see you're here, but your camera's not on, so I'm not sure. Okay, I'll back channel with her and find out what's happening with Jess. Alicia, would you like to tell us where you are?
Sure. Hi, my name is Alicia Koharchak. I am based in Chicago, Illinois, and I was a participant at the conference. I think probably my biggest takeaway was from Indy's session about not thinking about users, but actually thinking about people and thinking about them as persons.
I love that. Jeannie? Can you unmute yourself? Happens all the time.
Hi, I'm Jeannie Kim, and I'm actually a colleague of Alicia's, I'm proud to say. I'm a learning designer from Chicago, Illinois, and I'm a former educator. I had many takeaways. I thought this was a very well-organized conference. But I think my overall takeaway is I was very surprised at how impactful and online a small conference was, and how much I took out from having this personal learning community that was global and small, and how much that worked for me.
Actually, what you just made me think that, as a learning experience design, it would be interesting to do a meta thing about the learning experience design of the conference itself.
Yeah.
And you just sort of summarize some of that, the elements of that.
Yeah. So I'm not even going to talk about like the workshops itself, but like how I engaged with actually the workshops, the people. I mean, this was so much more satisfying than other conferences and other, I mean, I like dug into the material, and I really interacted with people in a different way. This might say a lot more about me and my own personality, but I just felt, felt very satisfied. So yeah, that was a good point, Maha. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrice, you're following on Twitter.
Hi, I'm Patrice, and unfortunately my lower third is not working. I'm an instructional designer at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. And although I really wanted to participate in the conference, unfortunately I just had the other conflicts that prevented me. So I did my best to try and follow on Twitter, which was overwhelming because it seemed like there was just so much awesome stuff going on. And so I wanted to participate in this hangout to hear a little more about what was going on and just, share and learn with you all.
Great. Jess, do you want to try one more time? I don't know. Patrice, can you help back know what's going on? I don't know if, I'm assuming you have her phone number or something. It must be easier than just DM. So I know Indy actually has to leave in 20 minutes. Am I right? And she's coughing. She's got a cough.
It never goes away.
Unfortunately. Maybe I should give you a chance to tell us about your takeaways from the conference. I don't know if you were able to engage beyond the session, but I know you were around on Twitter, so.
Yeah, I'm around on Twitter. I was just finishing up a really big project for a client, so I wasn't able to engage that much, but I did kind of take away from the Twitter feeds that like what Ms. Kim said, there is a small community and you guys are really interested in connecting, and I've seen this happen before with small groups of people who have some sort of motivation to connect with each other. There's always some underlying motivation that makes that thing hang together, and it's really lovely to see it happen here. And I know that Joyce could be one of the motivators, but I think that there's this interest in sharing ideas and interest in discussing ideas that was really prevalent amongst everyone here.
Joyce, how are you feeling about the conference now that it's over and we woke you up really early the next day?
Yes, I'm operating on about 3.5 hours sleep at the moment. It's 6:10 in the morning here in Melbourne. And we did our own closing and debrief last night. So it's been a long week, but I am just so pleased exactly because, well, for two things that you both just mentioned, you and Indy. And thanks for coming into this, Indy. That's just great. One, we did purposefully design it. We actually went about it by designing a learning experience. Both Spiros and myself work as learning designers in higher ed and have worked in corporate training as well. So we had a very good idea about how we wanted it to work. And Mark works as an education technologist, so he was there to help us put it all together. So it was purposely designed for those people who came to the session that I did. It was about facilitating design, and it was the first time that I got to kind of work through one of Indy's methods of mental models. We actually built a mental model for the conference, thinking through how we wanted it to work and what kind of needs the persons with purpose would have as they try to participate in this conference. So yeah, it was really amazing. And in terms of that idea of that small community hanging together, I've talked to people about experience design. I've been exploring in this area myself. Jess and I started together about 2 years ago in this conference in Dallas. And so we knew that there was interest out there, and we were hoping that there would be enough interest, because I've had an experience with small communities who come together in virtual conferences before, in the iMoot, which is still on this weekend. But that's around a Moodle community that already has existing connections. And here we had only a very tiny core of people who had existing connections, and almost everyone else was new, to each other. And I've had the same thing that Jeannie just mentioned, which is that, I feel like I now know everyone who was at the conference. And what's most amazing is that there were people signing up for the conference after all of the live sessions had finished. And then coming in, or people who had not participated throughout the week because they just got busy, but came in on Friday, listened to the recordings, and still left messages in the hallway forums and on Twitter. And so, this asynchronous activity that we were hoping was going to happen totally happened, and it's just been wonderful.
I think it's also very mindful that you've designed it that when there weren't a lot of sessions crammed together, like it wasn't a 1 day 10 sessions in a row thing, because if it was that, people wouldn't have time to engage beyond the sessions, and they'd be overwhelmed and exhausted from being online the whole time. But you had like 2 or 3 sessions a day, and then the open studios, which I wasn't able to participate in. And I don't know if Jeannie or Alicia or anyone else had a chance to participate in an open studio. I know Yolanda was attending some of the sessions. I don't know if Yishai or India had a chance to.
Unfortunately, because of the time zone, that was one thing that I couldn't, because it conflicted with my work day, I think, because I'm in Central Time. So I wasn't able to attend to the maximum capacity, but I still got a lot out of it.
So I was just, as you were, talking about this, I was thinking about how we might replicate a course in a similar format where, sometimes, like a course I used to teach, we spent a week face-to-face with the students, and then they were, online part of the time as a blended model. But I'm wondering if you could almost do like a live residency as a format like you used here.
That's a really interesting idea.
Yeah, sorry, I just jumped in, Maha. I've been thinking the same thing, Patrice. I think this format would work really well, and it gives a lot of flexibility to participants to shift things around, and to also do, like Maha, you were mentioning about the density of the sessions. And I think there's almost, because everything's going to be recorded and it's going to be available to you, pretty soon. And to be honest, we have to thank Mark for that, because he was just there in the background making sure that all of that actually happened. But because you can trust that, I think it means that once your brain is full, you can just kind of back off, and you can do other things, and then catch up when you're ready to. And I think that makes a really big difference.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think this conference is, it's a great example of the power of design, because, I kind of looked at the technology you're using, right? I mean, it's WordPress and Big Blue Button and Twitter, it's kind of, it's like stuff that anyone can get hold of, right? It's nothing, all open source, all freely available, all pretty easy to use. But it's more the way that you configure things, and then all that hard work orchestrating things in the background. I mean, as a speaker, the sort of all the preparations and all the kind of, sort of briefings and debriefings we had, it just kind of made everything work very smoothly. And I think it was really interesting that even if, I suppose, if you had more time and you can engage with more sessions in the open studios, you would get more out of it. But even if you just had a limited bandwidth and you can only kind of attend a couple of sessions and then follow the rest on Twitter, you still felt part of the community. So there was a real kind of design for sort of peripheral participation, and then the whole spectrum to to full participation. So I thought, wow, there's, for me, kind of as a learning designer, there's a lot to learn from the way you ran this conference. And that's, before I even get into the actual content, that the talks and the conversations and everything.
Yeah. I mean, I think actual face-to-face conferences can learn from the way this conference was designed. We always say that they should learn from what virtually connecting is, because all we do is conversations. We don't actually do sessions. Like, we don't care about what's happening in the sessions. We care about the discussions. And I wonder, Yolanda's saying it will linger for a while. And she was saying that when you watch the recordings, you feel engaged and so on. I don't know, like Indy, when you were, she's coughing, and I don't want to ask her questions when she's coughing, but I know she has to leave in 10 minutes. So I want to see if she has something to add here, and how you felt like with the interaction with your session before, after, during.
I think the interaction, because most of my interaction was kind of via Twitter. It was fine. It felt like it. I know that everybody has their own way of connecting, and it felt like I could still see in the window without having to learn something like. Okay, I have to admit something here. Everybody wants me on Slack, and I have not figured out Slack. So it's like everybody has their thing, right? So at least this was. There were many windows into it, and you could pick a window that worked for you, that fit inside the way that you approach things, which I think is probably something that Joyce and Spiro had designed. Yeah, one of the things I just was thinking about when Yishay was talking is, how different this is. We're all excited. We're sort of looking at each other going, wow, we're like around the globe, and and we know each other, and we've got, like, not only did we connect with each other's names and what their role is, but we connected based on philosophies and ideas. And so there was some strength to that connection. And I just can't help but wonder that, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, what the historians of that time will think of the way that we, we get so excited about it. Maybe it'll be normal. Maybe people will still be excited. I don't know.
That's a really good point. I think about my child who has met a lot of people online, and then when she meets them face to face, she sees us looking really excited about, oh my God, I'm hugging you. And she's like, don't we just talk to her every day? Like, what do you And last time we met Autumn, who's the co-director of Virtually Connecting in England, we spent some time together, and leaving, she's like, I'm going to miss you. And I was like, where are you going to miss me? We're going to see each other on Virtually Connecting. Right. What's this missing thing you guys talk about?
Exactly. I remember when I was an 18-year-old and I went on as an exchange student long enough ago that there were not even mobile phones, and you felt so isolated, and you had to deal with that isolation. Whereas now you can go anywhere and still be connected to your whole family, your whole set of networks, but also open yourself up to new people in that local area, which is just I don't know. I think that's a very human thing that I think traders and everybody have been doing for centuries and eons.
And though, having said that, unfortunately, Jess Knott, who was supposed to join us and who was with us, has dropped out and isn't able to come back in. And she's someone who's used Hangouts a lot. So despite all of that, sometimes people don't have access, who normally have access, not even the ones who have access at all.
Right.
But no, Wendy, who's also with us in Virtually Connecting, just joined, and I just want to give her a chance to introduce herself. But there's still space for Jess. So it's not, don't leave. Don't leave, Wendy. Just introduce yourself quickly and tell us one of your key takeaways from the conference.
Okay, thanks. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to be here and to be synchronous with you. And I really enjoyed the conference. There's still a lot to process, as there is mostly. And even though it was well paced, because I found that doing the 2 sessions in the morning was great because it was my morning time, and I could process that a lot easier in my brain space as opposed to now, which is quite early in Central Australia. But then in the afternoon, I was able to think more about that, and there was always lots of reading. So there was web links, and there was books to look at, and there was always sort of immediate follow-on things there as well. And so I did that sort of in the afternoon, and then sometimes joined the evening sessions, and then sometimes I would watch the recordings the next afternoon, for example. So I'm still processing it all. For me, I would say I'm on the start of my learning experience and designing for such things. And so there's a lot of information that I need to read, but there's also a lot that I picked up that fits really well with what I'm doing this year, which is critical researcher for EdTech through Open University. So a lot of the information is going to feed into that, I think. So I definitely can't pick a highlight, but I am doing a reflection piece and hope to have that up on the blog soon.
Can I just say, just reflecting on what Indy said about we're all going wow about this, but I think there is really something to reflect on this conference, because I've been doing, virtual conferences and hangouts and, around a MOOC in 2011. And, we had all these convergence sessions and all, and Twitter side feeds and everything. Still, something here clicked in a way that you don't see that often. So there is something kind of, very vibrant here. And I'm just thinking, there is a certain quality to meeting people face to face and being in the same space, and kind of compare this to, say, EduPlop, which we did earlier this year, and we're like 10 people locked up in the room for 3 days. There's a certain quality to that, but on the other hand, there was a certain rigor to the conversation here, because if somebody said something, somebody else could throw in a reference. So when you're using like Twitter alongside sort of synchronous, video or so on, if somebody asks a question, you can refer them to the right text, and that's something you don't do in a face-to-face conference, right? I mean, you chat with people in the coffee break and you say, oh yeah, you might want to look at this or that, but it's kind of, it evaporates, it's in terms of the emotional aspect, you feel like you've actually seen people, sort of full size and you've been there with them, but you don't have the same intensity of intellectual exchange.
Yeah, can I just respond, Yishay, because Yolanda has put in the chat too about she's interested in how people interact. And one thing that I've really felt with virtually connecting, as we are now, we're face-to-face, and it's not like you're sort of sitting in rows and you're distant from the keynote speaker or the big ideas speaker, and it is multimodal, so I can get hyperlinks that I can be reading while you're talking, but also your presentation was very interactive, and it was very it just fired off, like it was, you were going, how can I interact with these people, and please keep on chatting, and please make sure that I know you're alive, and that was a joke, and please put the lol in the chat. So it was very interactive, and it's much more interactive than if I was person number 99 in the big hallway of the amazing talk, which could have been the same content that you may have delivered before. But I think that's the multimodal aspect definitely changes it, but it also changes because this is much more face-to-face.
Yeah, I'll just jump in there because I've been thinking about that thing as well. And I was thinking particularly about people's relation to each other, like how, exactly that, what you were just saying, Wendy, about how close you are. And I think sometimes when you're in the big hallway for the conference and for that big keynote speaker, despite the fact that you're physically sitting close next to someone else, it doesn't mean that you're like mentally close to them. Like you haven't got that opportunity of just quickly sending them a message. I was in a training yesterday morning for Canvas, and a colleague of mine was sitting across the table, and she's trying to mouth stuff at me because we're trying to do, we're working on a project together, but the trainer is at the front and he's talking, and so she's trying not to disturb everyone else. And I'm like pointing at her laptop going, Skype me, so that we can be talking. And it's that, right? Like I'm physically close to you, but I can't be mentally close to you. I can't be interacting with you. And and that's what you want in this, and I think that's one of the things that I've always loved about conferences when I participate in the Twitter back channel, is that that's how I can then, start to approach people, despite the fact that there's this other thing that's happening on the stage. And so that's kind of what we were hoping with this. And we've all had that experience in webinars. And so then the trick became to extend that conversation into those hallway forums that we had set up, so that the conversation didn't just kind of die after the 1 hour was up. And that's one of the reasons why we introduced the open studios, so that energy and that exchange had somewhere to go.
Patrice was asking earlier about the open studios. So if someone's watching this and they have no idea what they are, could you tell us a little bit more about what you had planned for them, and then what actually happened? Because I'm sure it isn't always the plan.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, we really did want to create this space where people could go to talk to each other. We initially designed it as an opportunity for people to share their own projects, but that's one of the things that, the three of us have definitely talked about, and we talked about it a little bit at the debrief last night as well, which is that if we want people to contribute their own projects, we need to let them know earlier, like way before the conference, so that they can actually get some things together, because otherwise it's too confronting. And I think when you're already trying to attend an online conference and you're usually at work, it can be hard to find the time to actually put a little multimedia package together. So So we thought about it initially, like mostly as a place for people to share their projects and get feedback, and secondarily as this other space that people can go into, so that it was freer, where everyone had a voice. And the way that it worked for those people who didn't attend was that we basically had like a speaker, then an open studio session, and then another speaker. So one block in the morning here in Australia, and then another block that happened for us in the evening in Australia. And we had this huge spreadsheet with all of these locations and all of the times that we'd copied over from time and date. And we spent, I think Spiros and I and Mark spent about the best part of about 3 hours trying to figure out what would be good time blocks that would hit like most of the time zones. And so we had these 3 hour blocks, speaker, open studio speaker. And partly that was also dominated by the technology we were using, because the way that Big Blue Button works is that in order for the recording to start processing in the background, everyone has to leave a particular room. And only when everyone is out of the room and the session is the instance of that session is closed off, will it start the recording. So we needed to get everyone out of the room into another room so that that could be recording, it could be processing. And then we did the session here, get everyone out of that back into the other room, and then that one would start processing. So the open studios were, we had 2 that were really successful, and that we recorded as well, where there was just a lot of conversation going on. And then there were a few where either only a few people came in, or they just, there wasn't anything there because everyone was kind of hoping to just kind of listen in and maybe not ready to participate. But yeah, it's certainly something that we'll look at, how we can change that up the next time, and how we might use them. And we're going to be sending out a survey anyway, so we're really looking for people to give us feedback, which is essential to good design, right, Indy?
Yeah. I wonder, about the open studios and getting people to contribute their own projects. So kind of 2 things come to mind, and this is, just sort of brain dumping, right? Because I'm just thinking as you're talking. But one thing is, yeah, definitely, as you said, warn people beforehand, give them a couple of weeks to prepare, but also give them a kind of recipe of how to, because if you say just share your project, you know, people might be intimidated. But if you say, here's a 5-minute video that shows you how to share your project, and you say, I know, tell people to just kind of create, you know, a presentation and then use Screencast-O-Matic or something to create a short video and upload it. So kind of walk people through the process. And the other thing that might encourage people to do that is if you have a kind of a masterclass format where, you know, people share their projects and then somebody, you know, one of the speakers kind of gives them feedback on those. So I think it'd be really encouraging for people if you say, okay, you know, I share my project, and then somebody who I really look up to will kind of respond to that project or give me some feedback. So maybe that would make it kind of more exciting for people to participate. But like I say, it's just, you know, stream of consciousness here, you know.
Yolanda, what's the Google Slam format? I think you're agreeing with something Yishai is saying. What's that? Google Slam.
So I quite like the idea of just quick little multimedia snippets, and you can almost invite those beforehand and put them on a almost like a dashboard, and you can click on them and get all of that and can pick out themes. But the Slam idea is where Google, when they wanting new ideas for new products or services, they invite big ideas, but in a video format. So you have, I don't know how many, you can actually Google Slam. It's a specific format of few minutes where you have to sell your idea. So it's really quite dramatic and quite vibrant and energetic and quick and nasty, and it's there, out there. Not too much detail, not too finicky. I was just thinking, I mean, that's similar to Pecha Kucha, where you also just have to spit it out. And there's just a nice energy about it. One quick one after the other, that to compare to the 30-minute conversations with Q&A afterwards, I think can be a nice balance and kind of provide good synergy. I like Ishai's idea of you know, the format of also how do people put that idea out without having long bits of text. I think we're just too lazy to read, especially if we don't want it to become a heavy academic kind of researchy bat. So we want quick little takeaways, and we want to then, it must spark your interest, and then you decide, oh, I'm not interested, or I want to dig in deeper, something like that.
I like the idea of making like a short little 60-second video, kind of like a Twitter version of a video, but people could get through a lot of them that way. And I think it's like an elevator. It's important to be able to sell your idea quickly.
Yeah, I'll just jump in because Wendy just mentioned something in the chat that we talked about. So one of the things that we tried to do was to extend a format that people are familiar with and the language that people are familiar with in the conference from face-to-face conferences into the online space. So yes, we had these 2 virtual rooms, but we didn't call them virtual rooms. They were just the conference rooms. And we had these forums, but we tried not to call them forums. We called them the hallways, and they were marked as hallways in site. And I think where I fell down was that we actually called the projects that we were asking people, that we were soliciting from people, we called them open studio projects. And I think if we had just called them digital posters, because that's basically what they were supposed to act like a poster session where the poster is just up and people can contribute to it. But I think if we'd called them digital posters, it would have worked better. So, you know, that's a thing to iterate on for next time.
It might have actually made funding easier. I mean, it was not an expensive conference to attend, but you know, if people felt like they were like presenting something, but it also have been not a barrier, but sort of more work, I think, to actually post it. And then you can imagine it has to be like an infographic or something really fancy, you know. Sorry, you should say
No,
something.
yeah, no, we were just thinking it could be either a video or an infographic or just a blog post, you know, like it, because being online, it can be any of those formats.
Yeah, I just, I just love this, learning design or learning experience design in action, this whole conversation. And, you kind of, Joyce, you being completely open about, they thought it's a great idea. It kind of worked, but, the response wasn't as great as we hoped for. And then we're kind of having this, brainstorm here about, and this is what design is all about, right? I mean, yeah, you put something out there in the world, and if it, some of the things really worked well, and then you think about, wow, what was it about that made it work more than, similar things I've done or seen in the past, and something didn't work as you expected, and you think, okay, how can I iterate and improve it next time? So, yeah, I love this,
Yeah, I just wanted to hook into something that Maha was saying about the conference was affordable. It was actually one of those things where that was one of our aims, and in fact we talked in the back channel with Maha and with a few other learning designers that I know as well about what a good price point would be. We didn't so. In order to upskill myself into user experience design, service design, etc., I've gone to these really expensive conferences, and you're looking at like $800 for the Australian dollars for like 2 days, and some UX conferences are really, really expensive. And I thought, how can we bring this knowledge into the learning design community without being at that point? And I thought, virtually would be one way to go. The other thing that we've done, and I'm just responding to something that Patrice said earlier, and I know she's left now, but she'll listen to the recording, was around, why isn't it open? Why isn't everything open? And it's because, we paid all of our speakers. So it's not an academic conference. We've got practitioners, we've got people who run companies and work in businesses, and design is a job. In fact, that is the book that I've always got on my desk. Design is a job, and you should pay designers for their work. And I think in a way that's like a message for all of us as learning designers as well. So so what we do is we keep all of the recordings, etc. We'll keep it all inside the conference site for the next 3 months, and after that we will release them as podcasts, so that knowledge does live further on in the community. But we don't want people who made a commitment to the conference to feel like, hey, why did I pay to participate if it's all just going to be out there? So, that's an interesting one, because, obviously we're all committed to open education, myself, Mark, and Spiros, but, you have to kind of find a balance in that as well.
And I think I just wrote a post on Prof Hacker about that, is that there's a lot of privilege behind people who are able to make all of their work up there for free when others make money out of it, and they need to sort of strike that balance. I think it's pretty fair what you guys have been doing. So.
Joyce,
I wonder also actually if if you pay for something, you're usually more committed to it. So it's just like I don't know how many MOOCs I've signed up to, and obviously most of them I haven't even attended the first session because it's free. So and maybe here actually because people paid, they were slightly more committed, and you do have as you said, I even asked you beforehand, and you said yes. After a sort of a cool-off period, we're going to make everything available free. So I think that's a very, very reasonable and honest balance, and I think also, you guys have to make your living, and there's nothing to be ashamed about that. Most of us don't, as Maha said, don't have the privilege of being able to offer everything we do for free, right?
Joyce, you just made me think of something as well. So just for some context, our team, we're in higher education, and we changed our titles from instructional designers to learning designers, but there wasn't a correlation between a lot of the work that we were doing. So I'd love to continue with this community and just continue figuring out what is that distinction, because just the title change doesn't make you a learning designer. So I feel like that's a big takeaway as well.
Thanks, Alicia. We're currently going through that same issue at my university, so hopefully we can stay connected on that. You know, learning designer, and like I call myself a learning technologist, but that's definitely not my job title. So, you know, what we do and what we're called, that conversation is quite interesting to me.
Yeah, I've got some ideas about that, Maha, but I'm just aware that Indy may have to jump out, so you may want to hear from Indy first.
Yeah, I'm going to have to jump out, but there's been a lot of really interesting things that I could totally comment on. One, though, Joyce, is that I would love to see your mental model diagram. I'm actually looking for the opportunity to publish a little article about someone using this kind of understanding to really change the way that they were producing something. So if you're at all interested in that in another few months after you've recovered, please get in touch. I will help you write that, or I will write most of it, or whatever. So that's something that I'd love to connect on. Because this idea of you know, a learning environment and all that, I haven't had any experience in that, and so this is a really great application for me to be able to speak to people about. There was something a long ways away that a lot earlier, sorry, that excuse me, that Yusei said about kind of the excitement that you have when you connect doesn't evaporate, because when you're doing things virtually, you can actually send the links back and forth. And it made me think about a lot of the conferences that I go to and speak at live, where people will come up afterwards and they will want to ask a question, but then there's this weird, like, well, wait a minute, now I'm missing the other session that I wanted to go to, or I have to take this phone call from work and I can't do this right now. And there's no way to make that connection again later. Whereas with this, I guess what's happening is it's feeling like we've got more of a connection. And I'm just curious if that was in your mental model diagram or not. So yeah, so I think also you had mentioned the phrase mentally close to you. And I wondered if that was something that you had explored early on as something that people had been talking about or experiencing. So I've got a whole bunch of questions for you.
Excellent. Well, we'll leave the podcast to do at some point.
Yeah, that would actually be really great.
Yeah.
That would be super. We can do a little bit more later. And everybody else, I'm like so excited to meet everybody. So excited to hear like some of the things you guys are doing in Chicago and in Cornell and all over Australia and in South Africa. I'm trying not to cough, really, honestly. So it's really kind of a thrill to see that, and I'd love to see like if you guys do this again in a year, sort of, or in 2 years, or whatever the interval is. That would be really interesting to sort of meet back up and see what everybody's been working on. Cool. And now, with that, does anybody have any last minute questions for me?
No, I'm just seeing Maha there in the back. And I realized I've got a bit of an echo going, but she's not active at the moment. So I'm not quite sure where she's gone. If you have to jump off, go.
Okay. All right, sounds good. Great to meet you guys. And I hope to talk to you all maybe in a year or so, or at least stay connected with various people in between.
Thank you so much for making it.
Yeah, absolutely. And my offer, my interest in what Joyce has done also goes out to you guys if you end up having some sort of success with this kind of approach. I would really love to write an article with you or do a podcast or whatever the medium is that you guys prefer. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Bye. Joyce, when's the next LX conference?
We did talk about it at the debrief, and we had people from corporate environments and from higher education. Though just because of how our networks are situated, obviously we had more of a higher education kind of influx than corporate. And during one of the Open Studio sessions, there was this idea that maybe there could be one, like you could do 2 a year, and one could be more education focused and one could be more L&D, professional development training focused. That's an option. The other thing that we're really keen to do is to, so Jess and I, for ages now, ever since we met in Dallas 2 years ago, have been wanting to turn this blog that we set up at the time into a magazine, and now, you know, in talking to Mark and Spiros and to Jess as well, we're thinking maybe we can turn it more into like a community hub, and it could be a place where people can stay connected. Maybe we do webinars or, you know, things like that, and then the conference could drive from there. So some ideas to think about, you know, obviously when you make an ongoing community, that might lessen how much traction you get for a conference event. So, you know, I think we'll have to talk to everyone about what they think about that.
Makes sense, actually. I hadn't thought of it that way, but now that you mention it. There's a lot of stuff happening in the text chat. I hope some of that can come out to the people watching later, or even watching live go or talking.
I'll just summarize some of what's happening in the text chat. So there is an article that Yushay has shared, and we will be able to share that on Twitter, but we're just talking about terminology of job design and whether it is related to the continent that you're on, and whether that has any bearing. So we'll, we're still thinking about that.
Speaking of which,
sorry.
Go ahead.
I reckon that could be like a whole conference session on its own, because it really is in the United States or in North America, I suppose, and you know, instructional design is really prevalent. There was a great article that came out, I think, from OLC, or it's funded by OLC, about instructional design in higher ed, which is an article that I go back to all the time. In Australia and New Zealand, you tend to get everything. There's this weird, like, little Mad Libs type way that they use to put your job title together. So it's either like digital or E or virtual or whatever. And then there is either, you know, learning or some other kind of education type term. And then there is specialist or designer or something. And it's just weird kind of way of just like almost like magnetic poetry of job titles. And on the one hand, that gives you a lot of freedom in your role, but I think it also means that you never have a very specific position in the organization. I've often talked to Kim, you know, who spoke, who's the librarian, and it's a thing that I come back to all the time, and in our conversations about, you know, how we do our work, which is that a library has such a specific place and function inside the organization, whereas education technology is still like the new kid on the block. And nobody really knows how it fits in, and it's often funded through temporary funding, and there's a project here and it's central. No, now we're going to decentralize again. No, now we're going to be central again. And it's a bit of a struggle. So it's one of the things that I would really like is for us to think of ourselves as experienced designers who simply specialize in learning, in the same way that you've got experienced designers who specialize in airports, like the project that Indy shared. I've got another friend of mine who's a UX designer, an experienced designer, who specializes in airport research and how people use airports. And you've got people who specialize in UX in banking and insurance. And so, we're experienced designers who specialize in learning and education. And I think in a way that also gives us more flexibility of moving into other fields. Right? It means that you're not always tied to education.
True. You learn in other places too, right? I think I always had a problem with the term instructional because it was very teacher-centric, and it made it, first of all, just that teaching is instruction in itself is a problem to me. But then learning experience is a much more holistic, it sounds to me like I'm not involved. I'm a faculty developer, and I used to have instructional technologist in my title, and I didn't like the technology part of my title at all, and I left it for a long time. But when you talk about learning experience, it's a lot of different aspects to it. And I think it's more dynamic. It sounds more dynamic, like it's not talking about what you plan. The planning doesn't sound as mechanistic to me, and it sounds more dynamic, like you're talking about how the person will feel. Talking about the person, as Indy talks about, rather than the student or whatever. But one of the things that came to me during the conference, and I think this is how I talked a little bit more with Yishai about this, and I think Jeannie was in that conversation as well, is that I started to make connections between the approaches to design and the kinds of paradigms in social science as well. So I don't think people usually talk about these things, and I think Joyce didn't want to talk about this a lot, so I left it till the very end. And it's that I think you can approach design in a very positivist way of, this is the way, it's very technical and so on. And I think instructional design sometimes is done that way. Or you can approach it in a more subjective, interpretivist way, which I think a lot of the people here have been talking about. I think Indy's talk is a lot of what Indy was describing looked a lot to me like interpretive qualitative research. That social scientists do, only she's doing it as a designer, and most designers don't have the qualitative social science background. So to them, it's like, it's a very different way of doing it. But it's actually, as a paradigm or as a way of thinking or as a worldview, I think fits very well with that. And then what I've been trying to bring in, I know we've worked a little bit together, and he has this great work on design patterns. And all of that. And I think there are ways of doing these things in more participatory and more critical ways. And what Yolanda was talking about in her talk is a very participatory way of designing a course with your students in a way that we talk about or we imagine a lot, but it's amazing to someone actually doing it in practice. But what I'm looking for, is there something called critical LX design? Does that thing exist? Or is that something that's just in my mind that I'm imagining might exist?
Well, it might be exactly what you do, Maha. Without giving it that term, but because I know you in your courses are very experimental, right? And you're all constantly thinking about how do you create experiences which would lead your students to adapt a critical stance, right? And that's something that you can do, and I think actually that's something that you can do from a learning design or learning experience design perspective, and not from an instructional design perspective, because what you're aiming for is inherently unmeasurable, right? So instructional design, I'm talking about sort of the North American tradition, which actually comes from, it stems from the 30s, from military training programs, and the whole kind of learning objective paradigm, that you have these objectives that someone should learn ABC, and it should be measurable and certified, and you know, there's a whole kind of notion of compliance training. So if you've taken this course, we know that you're qualified to do this and that, right? So that's why, you know, for you, it seems very positivist, very kind of rigid and strict. Whereas you, in your courses, you're trying to get people to sort of change the way they think, or ask themselves questions about themselves. And that's not measurable, but you're designing the course for that. So I think what you do is, for me, critical learning design. The critical part of it is your own stance as a designer. So, you know, I kind of flashed my sort of design intention chart, which I use a lot in workshops and such. And you think, well, what are you aiming for as a designer? And first of all, you're trying to raise people's awareness to the fact that there could be perspectives different than theirs, right? So, you know, that's your intent as a designer, and then you build the experience around that.
Thanks, Yishai. That was very helpful. Reflecting me back to myself in a way that I wasn't looking at myself exactly that way.
So now you can add that to your job title, critical learning designer.
I just switched something in my Twitter profile today. I used to have my affiliation and my official job title and everything else, and then writeaholic, learnaholic. And then I thought, no, actually, I'm a writeaholic and learnaholic first, and then I do all these other things. And I was looking at, anyway, never mind. I'm going to stop talking. There's a lot of stuff happening in the text chat. Someone speak up.
Oh, oops. I don't know why it suddenly focused on me, but I'll ask my question. I think, Maha, I think I misunderstood your original question, or when you brought up the subject. I thought you asked if there was a critical race theory learning designer, and that's why I got really interested. I was like, oh, wow, that would be really cool. Because that's something that I'm very interested in, is critical race theory. I didn't realize you asked if there was a critical learning designer.
Right.
I'm very interested in the topic of privilege in this community and critical race theory and intersectionality. We don't have to go into this topic right now on Friday afternoon. I know it's a little deep, but I am very interested in how, in addressing this issue, especially in this professional community and the students we serve, you know, and you know, there is a very real digital divide. And you mentioned that you wrote an article on privilege on Prof Hacker, excuse me, and I'd love to read it. Because I see, you know, many of these issues come up and not necessarily be addressed. And that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I think we can
relevant pedagogy. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, but I see, I don't see that these topics and these issues are exactly at the forefront of the table when creating curriculum or online curriculum, when, you know, they could be. You know, I think that there is a real true gap. And this is just something that I'm personally very passionate about. So, yeah, and that's a great question about, you know, like the diversity of speakers. I mean, I'm interested in the demographics of the attendance and attendees, and it's just some things to consider.
Thank you, Jeannie. Go ahead, Yolanda.
Jenny, yes, I'm really excited about what you're saying and what you're raising. You may be aware of the very big debates in South Africa since about 2015 with roads must fall, fees must fall, the whole conversation about decolonizing education. And the idea that what started as a kind of economic and a kind of a race and discussion is now becoming a broader discussion about issues of access and assumptions that we make about people. For me, it all boils down to good design. And that's why a purposeful design. It is getting back to who is your real, the persons that are involved, and if it's about a diverse community, then putting yourself in their shoes or in their minds, having those conversations, engaging students in the process. I think every kind of problem, I just want to respond to say, let's just try and solve it through design. And I think often when it becomes a political conversation, we don't think of it in a designerly way. I think design should be all of the things that we discussed in this conference about empathy and listening, observing, looking, just feeling for the other person. And I think then we can actually talk about these things, and we won't be defensive and go back into our own little enclaves. We need to bring up these things that hurt and that are uncomfortable and are often quite messy, nasty, and not so nice to talk about, but we have to actually put it on the table, and then have empathy towards the person who doesn't see it in the same way. So I think it brings us back to the conversation that we must just talk about these things, try and understand each other. But I think these are real issues that we must address, because technology can run away with itself, and we get so bogged down with the little things. But we actually need to keep an eye on the broader picture. I think that's why I love being in this field right now, in this domain of learning and experience design, and how can design help us solve really, really big problems.
Yeah, that's right. We had one of the things that we had on the back burner we didn't get to implement is that I wanted to support educational projects through this conference as well. A friend of mine had just moved from Sydney, where she was a Moodle developer, etc. She won a scholarship, and she went to Africa for 3 months to kind of reconnect with. Because the father of her children was from there, so she wanted to take the kids back and look for reconnecting with the country that she was going to. She then came back and decided, no, actually, I want to be in Africa all the time. I want to be doing educational projects in Africa all the time. It's where I feel I can use my design skills the best. And so she's gone back. She moved back about 6 months ago. I reached out to her and I said, look, is there something we can do through the conference to actually support your project? And she's just in the early stages of setting up. So I was hoping to elicit some funding for that, but I was also hoping that all of us through a week-long hackathon could maybe come up with some design solutions or other things where we could help her. And Natalie and I worked together. We did get a little bit further towards a project brief, but we didn't quite get there. And this conference was MVP, minimum viable product. So we're not quite there, but I think it's something that I absolutely would love to build in to the conference the next time.
I'm just going to respond to something Yishai was saying in the chat over here. He was saying maybe I should run a conference on critical learning design. And I just want to say that the Digital Pedagogy Lab, who are the same people as Hybrid Pedagogy, they run an institute once a year, and occasionally more than once. And there's one in UMW in Virginia this August, and I'm giving a track with Kate Bowles from Australia about networking and intercultural learning. It's a critical approach to the use of the digital. Instead of saying educational technology, we say digital pedagogy, and we mean it in a critical stance. Amy Collier is co-teaching a track on instructional design. Well, it's called design, I think. And they take a critical approach to it. And if you know Amy Collier's work, it's all about messiness and emotion, and it's got nothing to do with the military background of instructional design and all that. So I think Digital Pedagogy Lab is that is that space where we do that. There's also one this year in Vancouver, and because when you think about why they did one in Vancouver, it was when the Trump original ban, the first ban that came out, they said, okay, if people can't come to the States, we're going to do another conference in Canada so that more people can make it, and because there were some people who wouldn't have been able to make it to the US. So it's not even just the content of your conference, but your entire class. And so people like Digital Pedagogy Lab, a lot of people who work in open education try to take those perspectives throughout in everything you do. It's not just about the content of what you do, but everything. So I just thought I'd put a plug for that. Yeah, I still need to go to North America, and I don't mind. I had a problem getting my visa, but I finally got it because I had a thumb injury and they needed my fingerprint. And I had to go 3 times until they agreed to take the fingerprint. But yeah, it's because they have to take the fingerprint. Why do they need my fingerprint in the first place? Why can't 9 fingers be enough? Why do they have to take all 10? But hopefully I'll be in Chicago first and then to Virginia. So, yeah, and Kate did write a blog post about why I think to us it's like you can go and make a difference in that environment, and people there need to listen. If I could be, I'll be there. That's not. I used to say I'll go unless Trump stops me, So, inshallah. Okay, we've just crossed the hour, and I don't want to keep people for too long. Yeah, thank you, Wendy. Yeah, I just noticed. Would anyone like to give in some closing thoughts before we? I just want to thank Joe so much for a really, really well-designed conference. A lot of inspiration, and thank you to all the speakers.
Yeah,
Can we just all turn our microphones off and do a clap for Joyce? Because during the conference, she was like, "Please give a virtual clap." No, please take your microphone off so she can hear it, because this is one forum where you can give a real clap. So can you put your mics on?
That's so cool, Wendy. We should do this all the time.
Thank you. That's very nice.
It's just a function that Big Blue Button doesn't have yet.
No, that's right. Yeah. Thanks so much, everyone. Thank you all for. I mean, I've said this at our closing, but I really wanted to thank all the participants, everyone who joined up and signed up, all the speakers as well. Everyone was taking a chance on something that was totally unknown, and trusting that it was going to be there when we finally got to that moment. And I just love the fact that we have a community that is so supportive, that actually does that and takes a risk and joins in. So really gratitude for me and Mark and Spiros to everyone else for making it the success that it has been. And for when things didn't work, we did have some technical glitches on one of the days, just being super supportive and being okay with it. And I think, again, the fact that we were recording things, people were like, that's fine, I'll catch up later. So that forgiveness, and it was almost like like a group design as well. Just that participation has just been heartwarming, and I'm going to be reflecting on this experience for a long time. So thanks from us to everyone who's participated.
Any more last words from anyone? Folks are saying thank you in the chat if you want to say anything out loud. Okay, thank you all so much. I'm going to go off the air, but I'm going to stay online a few more minutes if you want to chat offline away from the audience. Thank you.